My name is Joseph. I'm 32 years old and work as a successful software engineer. I'd always believed family meant unconditional support, so I spent years helping my parents financially. Last Thanksgiving should have been a warm family reunion, but instead, it revealed the painful truth about our relationship. My brother had always been the golden child, but I never expected how far my parents would go to protect him. That night became the last time I would ever contribute a single dollar to my family. Before I continue with this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever felt taken for granted, hit that subscribe button right now and join me on this journey of self-respect. Growing up in our modest home in suburban Pennsylvania, our family dynamic was always clear to me. My father, Martin, now 56, worked as a mechanic at a local garage. He'd come home with grease-stained hands, exhausted but always with enough energy to play catch with Nathan, my younger brother. My mother, Deborah, 54, worked part-time as a nurse at the community clinic. Her schedule arranged perfectly to attend all of Nathan's school events, while I often sat in empty auditoriums waiting for someone to pick me up. Our neighborhood wasn't fancy, but wasn't poor either. Most families around us lived paycheck to paycheck, and we were no exception. Our house, a 3-bedroom rancher with fading blue paint, represented the entirety of my parents' investment portfolio. The mortgage was their biggest financial burden, one that would eventually become mine without my consent. The contrast in how my parents treated Nathan and me wasn't something that developed over time, it was there from my earliest memories. 4 years younger than me, Nathan came into the world when I was just old enough to understand the shift in attention. I remember standing in the hospital corridor, holding a small stuffed bear I'd saved my allowance to buy for my new baby brother, only to be told to wait outside while extended family cooed over the new arrival. "Your brother is special," my mother would often say when I questioned why Nathan got new basketball shoes while I inherited my cousin's hand-me-downs. "He has such potential. You understand, right? You're the responsible one." Being labeled the responsible one meant I was expected to fend for myself from an early age. By 12, I was mowing lawns in summer and shoveling driveways in winter. When I turned 16, I started working at the local grocery store, bagging items and collecting shopping carts in the icy parking lot. My paycheck didn't go toward fun teenage activities. Instead, it bought my own school supplies, clothes, and eventually helped with household expenses when my father was temporarily laid off. Meanwhile, Nathan's potential meant he needed to focus solely on sports and socializing. His baseball gear was top of the line, his social life unrestricted by chores or work responsibilities. When he wrecked his first car, a 16th birthday gift far nicer than anything I'd ever received, my parents dipped into their meager savings to replace it without hesitation. Despite everything, I performed exceptionally well in school. My teachers recognized my aptitude for mathematics and computer science, encouraging me to apply for scholarships. When acceptance letters arrived from several prestigious universities, my parents' reaction was tepid at best. "College is expensive," my father commented, newspaper barely lowering. "You sure you want to take on all that debt?" I ended up attending State University on a partial scholarship, working 30 hours weekly at the campus IT department to cover the remainder of my tuition and expenses. Those 4 years were a blur of lectures, late-night coding sessions, and weekend shifts. I graduated with honors, minimal debt, and a job offer from TechVision, one of the country's leading software companies. My starting salary was more than my parents had ever made combined. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice, my income nearly doubling. It was around this time that the family financial dynamic began to shift. What started as occasional requests, helping with an unexpected car repair, covering the property tax bill when they came up short, quickly became regular expectations. "Joseph, the furnace is acting up again," my mother would call. "Your father got the quote, 'It's only $2,000. You'll transfer it today, right?' Or my father, 'The insurance premium went up again. Since you're doing so well, we thought you could help out the family a little more.'" These weren't requests, but statements of expectation. There was never gratitude, just acknowledgement that I had fulfilled what they viewed as my filial obligation. I rationalized their behavior, telling myself that parents had sacrificed for their children for generations. Now it was simply my turn to give back. What I didn't realize then was that this giving back was one-sided. Nathan, now working sporadically as a bartender and perpetually chasing the next big idea that would make him rich with minimal effort, contributed nothing to the family finances. In fact, he regularly required bailouts of his own, which mysteriously never came with the same expectations placed on me. By the time I turned 30, I was effectively paying my parents' mortgage, car payments, insurance premiums, and most major household repairs. I had unwittingly become the family bank, expected to dispense funds without question or recognition. The reality of our relationship had shifted, but I hadn't yet found the courage to acknowledge what it had become. Nathan had always been the charming one in the family. Even at 28, he maintained the boyish smile and carefree attitude that had gotten him out of trouble throughout his life. Standing at 6 feet with naturally athletic build and our father's striking blue eyes, he could charm his way into or out of almost any situation. His apartment was filled with half-completed projects, a guitar he'd played for 2 weeks before losing interest, expensive camera equipment for the photography business he never started, and exercise gear from his brief stint as a personal trainer. While I built a stable career through persistence and hard work, Nathan bounced between jobs like they were dating prospects, never committing to anything for more than a few months. He'd been a barista, retail associate, rideshare driver, personal trainer, and bartender, all within the span of 3 years. Each new position came with grand proclamations about how this was the one, the job that would finally recognize his special talents and propel him to greatness. The first major financial incident happened when Nathan was 24. He'd been driving home from a party, slightly intoxicated though he'd never admit it, and crashed his car into a highway barrier. The vehicle, a reasonably new Mazda our parents had helped him purchase, was severely damaged. Nathan walked away with minor scratches, but the repair bill came to nearly $4,000. Joseph, my mother called me the next day, her voice carrying that special tone reserved for asking favors. Your brother had a little accident last night. The car needs some work, and you know how tight things are for us right now. I transferred the money that same day, telling myself it was a one-time emergency. Nathan didn't even call to thank me. I received a text message with a thumbs-up emoji and solid bro. 2 weeks later, I saw pictures on his social media of a weekend trip to Miami with friends. Then came the business opportunity when I was 31 and Nathan 27. He'd met someone at the bar where he worked who was connected in the local restaurant scene. Together, they had hatched a plan to open a fusion taco restaurant that would, according to Nathan, revolutionize the local food scene. All he needed was $25,000 for his share of the startup costs. "This is it, Joseph," he said over dinner at my apartment, eyes bright with excitement. "This is the opportunity I've been waiting for. Marcus knows all the right people, and we've already looked at a perfect location. Against my better judgment and the advice of my close friend Travis, I wrote Nathan a check with one condition. He would provide monthly updates on the business progress and repay the loan within 2 years. He agreed enthusiastically, promising this investment would pay dividends for years to come. 3 months later, I discovered through a mutual acquaintance that the restaurant plan had dissolved almost immediately. Marcus had apparently taken his portion of the investment and disappeared, while Nathan had used my money to lease a luxury apartment and buy a used Audi. When confronted, he became defensive. The restaurant deal fell through, but I needed reliable transportation for my new sales job, he explained, conveniently neglecting to mention the apartment upgrade. "I'll still pay you back. Just give me some time." Not a single dollar has been repaid to this day. Family gatherings became increasingly difficult to endure. Every holiday or birthday celebration inevitably transformed into a showcase for Nathan's latest endeavors, no matter how insignificant. He would regale the family with tales of the big client he'd impressed or the industry connection he'd made, while my parents nodded approvingly. My own professional accomplishments, a major project success, a significant promotion, or industry recognition, were acknowledged with cursory interest before the conversation swung back to Nathan's potential. "Your brother is networking with Thomas Wilson's son," my mother once whispered excitedly at a family barbecue, referring to a local business owner. "He could be managing one of their stores by next year." The final straw came 8 months before that fateful Thanksgiving. Nathan had developed a gambling habit, initially small bets on sports games that gradually escalated to online poker and casino visits. He managed to accumulate nearly $12,000 in debt, some of it to people who didn't extend payment plans or reasonable interest rates. He showed up at my door at midnight, face pale and hands shaking. For once, the gravity of his situation had penetrated his bubble of perpetual optimism. He admitted everything, showing me threatening text messages from one particularly impatient creditor. "I messed up, Joseph," he said, voice cracking. "I really messed up this time. They said they know where I live, where I work. I don't know what to do." I paid off his debts the next day, liquidating a portion of my investment portfolio to do so. This time, I made Nathan sign an actual contract drawn up by a lawyer friend, specifying repayment terms and explicitly stating this was the last financial assistance I would provide. He signed without reading it thoroughly, relief washing over his face as the immediate danger disappeared. 2 days later, my parents called. Instead of gratitude for protecting their son from potential harm, I received a lecture. "He's your brother, Joseph," my father said sternly. "Family helps family without all these legal documents. You've made him feel like a criminal. Nathan is going through a difficult phase," my mother added. "He needs support, not judgment. You've always been so hard on him." The conversation left me stunned. In their eyes, my willingness to help came with too many strings attached, while Nathan's reckless behavior deserved endless patience and understanding. It was the clearest indication yet of the fundamental imbalance in our family, but I still wasn't ready to confront the full truth. That realization would wait until Thanksgiving. The call came 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I was in my office at TechVision, wrapping up a meeting with my development team when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stepped into the hallway to answer. "Joseph, you're coming for Thanksgiving, right?" Her voice carried that particular blend of assumption and demand that I'd grown accustomed to. "I'm planning the menu and need to know how many to expect." "I was thinking of maybe taking a trip this year," I replied, the half-formed idea of a solo vacation to Colorado suddenly appealing. "It's been a busy quarter, and I could use the break." There was a momentary silence before her tone shifted to one I recognized well, subtle disappointment mixed with emotional leverage. "Your father will be so disappointed. And Nathan has some exciting news he wants to share with everyone. It would mean so much to have the whole family together." The mention of Nathan's exciting news triggered an immediate sense of wariness. In my experience, his announcements typically preceded requests for money or support. Nevertheless, I found myself agreeing to attend, the ingrained response of the dutiful son overriding my instinct for self-preservation. "Great!" My mother's voice brightened instantly. "Oh, and I've invited Aunt Beth and Uncle Thomas, too. They haven't seen you in ages." That detail sent another warning signal. Aunt Beth and Uncle Thomas were my father's sister and brother-in-law, a couple known for their conservative views on family obligation and their particular fondness for Nathan. In family gatherings, they frequently made comments about how I should be more generous with my big city money, despite having no real understanding of my financial situation or contributions. The weekend before Thanksgiving, I went shopping for gifts, still clinging to the hope that tangible demonstrations of care might somehow balance our relationship. I selected an expensive leather jacket for my father, a designer handbag for my mother, and even a high-end wireless speaker for Nathan. The total came to over $1,000. Money spent in what I now recognize was a desperate bid for familial approval. I left my apartment at 5 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day, wanting to arrive early enough to help with preparations. The drive from Chicago to my parents' home in suburban Pennsylvania took nearly 9 hours, giving me ample time to rehearse conversations and steel myself for the inevitable family dynamics. I stopped only for gas and coffee, pushing through fatigue in service of family obligation. When I pulled into the familiar driveway, I noticed immediate changes to the property. The front lawn, usually meticulously maintained by my father, looked neglected. The gutters sagged in places, and the paint on the front door was peeling. These small signs of disrepair were uncharacteristic and concerning. My mother greeted me at the door with a quick hug before immediately putting me to work carrying dishes from the basement storage. My father offered a perfunctory handshake, then returned to watching football in the living room. Nathan hadn't arrived yet. Punctuality had never been his strong suit. As I moved between the kitchen and dining room, setting the table with the good china reserved for special occasions, I caught fragments of my parents' hushed conversation from the kitchen. "Just don't bring it up during dinner," my father murmured. "He won't understand," my mother replied. You know how practical he is about everything. Nathan says the investor is very interested. Once that's finalized, everything will be fine. I slowed my movements, straining to hear more, but they noticed my presence and abruptly changed the subject. My mother asked about my drive while my father returned to the living room, the momentary tension hanging in the air between us. While helping my mother prepare the cranberry sauce, I offered to fix the loose cabinet door that had been swinging free since my last visit 6 months ago. "Oh, don't worry about that now," she dismissed. "Your father's been meaning to get to it. He's just been so busy helping Nathan with his new project." "What project is that?" I asked casually, chopping celery for the stuffing. "You'll hear all about it at dinner," she replied with a mysterious smile. "Nathan wants to make the announcement himself. It's going to change everything for him." The afternoon progressed with mounting unease. Aunt Beth and Uncle Thomas arrived bearing pumpkin pies and immediate questions about my love life and career, thinly disguising their judgment behind expressions of concern. "Still working those long hours at the computer company?" Uncle Thomas asked, helping himself to the appetizers I'd arranged. "You know, there's more to life than money, Joseph." Aunt Beth chimed in. "Nathan was just telling us about his entrepreneurial plans. So exciting to see him following his passion instead of just climbing some corporate ladder." I smiled tightly and excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment away from the thinly veiled criticism. In the hallway, I passed my mother's purse, which had fallen from the entryway table, spilling some contents onto the floor. As I knelt to gather the scattered items, a folded paper caught my attention, an official-looking notice with red final warning text visible at the top. Against my better judgment, I glanced at the partially unfolded document. It was a mortgage delinquency notice, indicating that my parents were 3 months behind on payments, with foreclosure proceedings scheduled to begin after the new year. The outstanding amount, including late fees and penalties, totaled just over $9,900. I quickly returned the notice to my mother's purse, mind racing. My parents had never mentioned any financial difficulties beyond their usual requests for help with expenses. In fact, I'd transferred $3,000 just last month for what my father had called property taxes. Clearly, that money had gone elsewhere. As I washed my hands in the bathroom, trying to process this discovery, Nathan finally arrived. I could hear the immediate shift in the household energy. My parents' voices rising in genuine enthusiasm, Aunt Beth's delighted exclamations, Uncle Thomas's hearty laughter. The golden child had arrived, and any concerns about mortgage payments or household repairs seemed instantly forgotten. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and rejoined the family gathering, the hidden foreclosure notice weighing heavily on my mind. Little did I know that this document would become the catalyst for the confrontation that would permanently alter our family dynamic. We gathered around the dining table at precisely 4:30 in the afternoon. The spread was impressive despite the evident financial strain in the household. Roast turkey with all the traditional sides, multiple pies for dessert, and wine that I recognized as being considerably more expensive than what my parents typically purchased. My mother had clearly gone all out for this meal, though I now understood the precarious foundation it was built upon. The seating arrangement itself told a story. Nathan was placed at my father's right hand, the position of honor. My mother sat at the other end of the table, with Aunt Beth beside her. I was positioned between Uncle Thomas and an empty chair meant for Nathan's girlfriend, who had apparently canceled at the last minute. Information shared with much more sympathy than my prior breakup had ever received. "Let's say grace," my father announced, extending his hands to Nathan and my mother. The circle formed, with everyone bowing their heads while my father delivered a prayer, emphasizing gratitude for family and new beginnings. The pointed glance toward Nathan during those words wasn't subtle. The first 20 minutes of dinner progressed with superficial pleasantries. We discussed safe topics, the unseasonably cold weather, a recent local sports victory, and Aunt Beth's new position at her church's charity organization. I contributed appropriately, asking follow-up questions and offering congratulations where expected, all while the foreclosure notice loomed in my thoughts. The atmosphere shifted when my mother delicately tapped her wine glass and looked expectantly at Nathan. "I think someone has some exciting news to share with the family." Nathan straightened in his chair, his expression transforming to one of practiced importance. At 28, he still maintained the boyish charm that had served him so well, though I noticed new lines around his eyes that spoke of stress beneath the confident exterior. "So," he began, setting down his fork with theatrical precision. "I've been working on something big. You all know I've always had a passion for the culinary world." This was news to me. His passion for the culinary world had never extended beyond elaborate Instagram posts of meals at restaurants I suspected he couldn't afford. "I've been developing a business plan for the past few months," he continued, "for a unique dining concept that will fill a genuine gap in the local market. A fusion restaurant combining traditional American comfort food with modern Asian influences." Uncle Thomas nodded approvingly. "Smart. People always need to eat, even in a down economy." "Exactly," Nathan agreed, warming to his audience. "And the location I've found is perfect. The old hardware store on Maple Street that closed last year. The property owner is willing to lease with an option to buy." My father beamed with pride. "Tell them about your investor, son." Nathan's smile widened. "I've connected with a potential investor who has significant experience in the restaurant industry. Marcus Donovan. He managed the Sterling downtown for 3 years before moving into restaurant development. He's very excited about my concept and is considering a substantial investment that would cover most of the startup costs." I nearly choked on my wine. Marcus Donovan was the same connection who had disappeared with a portion of my $25,000 loan to Nathan the previous year. The same Marcus who, according to mutual acquaintances, had been a bar back at the Sterling, not a manager, and had no experience in restaurant development whatsoever. "Marcus Donovan?" I asked, struggling to keep my tone neutral. "The same Marcus from the taco restaurant venture?" A flash of irritation crossed Nathan's face. He had some personal issues that interfered with our previous project. But he's in a much better position now, with access to capital from family connections. "That's wonderful, Nathan," my mother interjected quickly. "We've always known you had an entrepreneurial spirit. When will the funding be finalized?" "We're meeting next week to sign the initial paperwork," Nathan replied, though I detected a slight hesitation. "There are just a few minor details to work out about equity distribution." "And what's the total investment needed?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "What's your contribution going to be?" The table fell momentarily silent. My father shot me a warning look, but I maintained eye contact with Nathan, waiting for his answer. "Initial capitalization will be approximately $75,000, he said, adopting business jargon I suspected he barely understood. "Marcus is bringing 60, and I'll be contributing the remainder, primarily through sweat equity and my culinary expertise." "Your culinary expertise?" I repeated, setting down my fork. "Nathan, you've never worked in a kitchen. You don't have any experience in restaurant management. How exactly is this going to work?" "Joseph," my mother interrupted, her voice carrying a sharp edge, "can't you just be supportive for once? Your brother is sharing his dream with us." Aunt Beth nodded in agreement. "Some people understand that success requires taking risks, not just playing it safe in a corporate job." I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade. I just think there needs to be a realistic plan. Restaurants have an extremely high failure rate, and without experience—" "There you go again," my father cut in. "Always the pessimist. Always thinking you know better than everyone else because of your fancy degree." The tension in the room escalated rapidly. Nathan sat back in his chair, a familiar expression of victimhood settling over his features. The same look he'd perfected whenever he was facing legitimate criticism. "Actually," I said, deciding that truth was necessary, even if unwelcome, "I'm concerned because the last business venture with Marcus resulted in a $25,000 loss. My loss, specifically, since I provided the capital that was never used for its intended purpose." "That was different," Nathan protested. "We were younger, and the market conditions weren't right." "It was last year," I countered, "and the money went to your apartment upgrade and that Audi you're driving, not to any business." My mother's face had grown increasingly flushed. "Joseph, that's enough. This is Thanksgiving dinner, not some corporate boardroom where you can interrogate people." Something inside me snapped then. The accumulated weight of years of unequal treatment, financial exploitation, and willful blindness. "You know what? You're right. This isn't a boardroom. In a boardroom, people are honest about finances." I locked eyes with my mother. "Like being honest about being 3 months behind on the mortgage payments." The color drained from my mother's face. "You went through my purse?" "The notice fell out when your purse tipped over," I explained. "Nearly $10,000 in arrears, with foreclosure proceedings scheduled to begin after the holidays. Were you planning to mention that, or just wait until after Nathan's big restaurant failure to ask me to cover it? My father slammed his hand on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. How dare you speak to your mother like that? Our finances are none of your business. None of my business? I laughed incredulously. That's interesting, considering I've paid over $40,000 toward this house in the past 2 years alone. Money that apparently hasn't been going toward the mortgage at all. We've had expenses, my mother said defensively. Medical bills, car repairs. Nathan's gambling debts? I suggested. The down payment on his Audi? Which essential family expense required prioritizing over the roof over your heads? Nathan stood abruptly. Don't blame this on me. Mom and Dad make their own financial decisions. Decisions that always seem to benefit you, I retorted, rising to meet him across the table. While I get the privilege of covering the consequences, my father stood then, his face contorted with anger I'd rarely seen directed at anyone but me. That's enough. Get out. Paying our bills doesn't make you family. The room fell silent, his words hanging in the air between us. In that moment, decades of family dynamics crystallized into perfect clarity. I slowly placed my napkin on the table, a strange calm settling over me. My mother reached for my arm, her expression softening into the manipulative concern I now recognized so clearly. Joseph, your father doesn't mean that. You're just upset because you're jealous of your brother's potential. I smiled, a genuine smile born of sudden liberation. Then let his potential pay the $9,900. I'm sure the bank will accept potential as currency. I turned toward the door, pausing only to address the stunned faces around the table. Thank you for clarifying what family means to you. I won't forget this lesson. As I walked out, leaving behind untouched pie and unresolved arguments, I felt something unexpected, not sadness or anger, but relief. For the first time in my adult life, I was seeing my family without the filter of obligation or hope. It was painful, but it was also the truth I had needed for far too long. The drive to the nearest hotel was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and my thoughts raced with a mixture of rage, hurt, and strange liberation. The Holiday Inn off Interstate 80 had a vacancy, a small Mercy on Thanksgiving evening, and I checked in just after 7:30, requesting a room far from the elevator where I could think in peace. Sitting on the edge of the neatly made bed, I pulled out my phone to see the notifications already accumulating. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from Nathan, and a text from my father that simply read, "Your mother is upset. Call her." No apology, no acknowledgement of his words, just another demand disguised as family concern. I silenced my phone and opened my laptop instead. For years, I had maintained detailed records of every financial contribution to my family, partly for tax purposes, but also out of some subconscious need to document the imbalance. The spreadsheet told a stark story. In the past 5 years alone, I had provided over $87,000 to my parents and Nathan, not including gifts or shared experiences like vacations. The realization settled over me like a physical weight. I had been functioning as an ATM, not a son or brother. My father's words, "Paying our bills doesn't make you family," replayed in my mind, bringing with them an unexpected clarity. If financial support didn't make me family, then perhaps the withdrawal of that support wouldn't remove me from the family either. It would simply reveal the truth of what our relationship had become. By midnight, my decision was made. I drafted a detailed action plan, my software engineer's mind approaching the problem methodically. If I was going to extricate myself from this financial entanglement, it would need to be thorough and decisive. I started with the credit cards. 2 years earlier, I had added my parents as authorized users on my backup credit card for emergencies. Since then, the card had been used for everything from grocery shopping to Nathan's gym membership. I logged into my account and reported the card as lost, requesting an immediate freeze and replacement with new numbers that would only be sent to my address. Next came the automatic payments. Over time, I had set up recurring transfers for my parents' car insurance, cell phone bills, streaming services, and even their monthly neighborhood association dues. One by one, I canceled each scheduled payment, documenting the cancellation confirmation numbers in my spreadsheet. The mortgage situation required more thought. While I wasn't officially on the loan, I had been making direct payments to the mortgage company for over a year. I drafted an email to their customer service department, formally notifying them that I would no longer be making payments on behalf of my parents and requesting confirmation that my name and financial information be removed from their account notes. I called my attorney's voicemail and left a detailed message requesting an emergency consultation about financial separation from family members and any potential legal implications I should be aware of. While I didn't believe there were formal obligations beyond what I had already documented, I wanted professional reassurance. Finally, I composed emails to the utility companies, electric, water, gas, and internet, explaining that I was no longer financially responsible for my parents' accounts and requesting removal from any payment arrangements. I scheduled these emails to send automatically at 6 o'clock the following morning, giving me time to sleep before dealing with the inevitable fallout. Sleep, however, proved elusive. I lay awake watching the digital clock tick from 1:30 to 2:15 to 3:20. My mind replaying years of subtle manipulations and dismissals I had accepted as normal family dynamics. By 4 in the morning, I gave up on rest and headed to the hotel's small fitness center, running on the treadmill until physical exhaustion temporarily drowned out the emotional turmoil. The first text message arrived at 6:45, just as I was stepping out of the shower. From my mother: "The credit card isn't working. Need to buy milk and eggs. What's going on?" By 7:30, the messages had grown more frantic. "Joseph, the bank says you've canceled all the automatic payments. This isn't funny. Your father is trying to pay the water bill, and they're saying it's past due. Call immediately. Nathan says you've frozen him out too. What are you thinking?" At 8:15, my father's name appeared on my phone screen. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Whatever game you're playing needs to stop right now. Your mother is in tears. Is this how you treat family? Call us immediately." The irony of his question wasn't lost on me. By 9, I had composed a single response, sent to all 3 family members. "I'm respecting your statement that my financial contributions don't make me family. From now on, you'll need to manage your own expenses. Any outstanding debts between us are forgiven. Please do not contact me again regarding money matters." What followed was a barrage of calls, texts, and even emails, ranging from guilt-inducing, "Your mother hasn't stopped crying," to threatening, "You'll regret treating family this way," to conciliatory, "Let's talk about this like adults." I maintained my silence, focusing instead on confirming that each financial tie had been successfully severed. Nathan's approach shifted the quickest, moving from shocked outrage to calculated manipulation. "I know we've had our differences, but don't punish Mom and Dad for that. They're getting older and need our support." When I didn't respond, his true colors emerged. "You've always been jealous of me. Everyone sees it. When my restaurant takes off, I'll remember how you tried to sabotage me at my lowest point." I was in the hotel restaurant having a solitary breakfast when the manager approached my table, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Collins, there's a police officer asking to speak with you in the lobby." Confused but calm, I paid my bill and walked to the front desk. A uniformed officer stood waiting, expression professionally neutral. "Joseph Collins? I'm Officer Ramirez. Your parents have filed a report claiming you've committed financial fraud against them. They're alleging you've stolen their identity and maliciously interfered with their accounts. I'd like to get your side of the story." And so began the next phase of chaos, explaining to law enforcement that no, I hadn't stolen anyone's identity. Yes, I had documentation for every financial contribution I'd made, and no, there was no legal obligation for me to continue supporting adult family members. The officer, to his credit, seemed to quickly grasp the situation, particularly when I showed him the spreadsheets and confirmation emails on my phone. Family disputes aren't typically police matters unless actual crimes have been committed, he explained after reviewing my evidence. This appears to be a civil issue at most. I'll note in my report that I found no evidence of criminal activity, but your parents may still pursue civil remedies if they believe they have a case. As Officer Ramirez left, I noticed my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the realization that my family's first response to losing their financial support wasn't to respect my decision or reflect on their treatment of me. It was to try to have me arrested. The depth of their entitlement surpassed even my most cynical expectations. I checked out of the hotel immediately after, driving 3 hours to a different city before checking into another accommodation under my middle name. I needed space and time to process what had happened and prepare for whatever came next. The family that had raised me, the people I had supported for years, had just attempted to have me criminally charged rather than face the consequences of their own financial decisions. As I sat in this new anonymous hotel room, I felt something unexpected beginning to take root, alongside the hurt and anger, a sense of freedom. For the first time in my adult life, my resources were truly my own. My obligations were of my choosing, not imposed by familial guilt. The cost of this freedom was high, perhaps the permanent fracturing of my family relationships, but in that moment it felt like a price worth paying. The next morning, I contacted my employer and requested an emergency week of personal leave. My supervisor, Sarah, had always been understanding, and this situation was no exception. "Take whatever time you need, Joseph," she said. "Your projects are under control, and the team can cover until you're back." With professional obligations temporarily addressed, I turned my attention to securing my personal situation. I changed all my passwords, froze my credit with the 3 major bureaus as a precaution, and notified my bank of potential fraudulent access attempts. These steps weren't just practical protection. They represented my first actions as someone truly looking out for his own interests, rather than sacrificing them for family. By mid-afternoon, my phone had accumulated 37 missed calls and over 50 text messages. Most were from my immediate family, but others came from extended relatives. Apparently, my parents had begun spreading their version of events. Aunt Beth's voicemail was particularly venomous. "I always knew you were selfish, Joseph. But abandoning your parents when they need you most is beyond contempt. You should be ashamed." What struck me most was how none of these messages acknowledged my perspective or questioned why I might have taken such dramatic action. The narrative had been set. I was the villain, the ungrateful son who had cruelly cut off his loving family without provocation. After considerable thought, I composed an email to selected extended family members, those I had reason to believe might listen objectively. I explained the years of financial support I had provided, the constant prioritization of Nathan's needs over household stability, and the breaking point at Thanksgiving dinner. I attached documentation of my contributions and my father's explicit statement that they didn't make me family. I ended with a simple request for understanding, if not support, and a boundary that I wouldn't discuss the matter further. The responses varied dramatically. My cousin Michael, always slightly removed from family politics, offered genuine sympathy. "I had no idea things were this bad, Joseph. Take care of yourself first. That's not selfish, it's necessary." Others were less receptive. My mother's sister accused me of airing dirty laundry and exaggerating to make yourself look better. My grandfather, normally the family peacemaker, sent a one-line response: "Family forgives. Remember that." The most unexpected alliance came from my colleague Travis. When I returned to work the following week, he noticed my distraction during our project meeting and invited me for coffee afterward. Something in his expression made me trust him with the full story. "My father was just like your brother," he revealed after listening intently, "golden child who could do no wrong, while I was expected to clean up his messes." It took me years of therapy to understand it wasn't my responsibility. Travis became my sounding board in the weeks that followed, offering perspective when self-doubt crept in and reminding me that healthy relationships don't financially exploit one person for another's benefit. His support proved invaluable when the situation escalated further. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my mother appeared at TechVision's reception desk, demanding to see me. I was in a meeting when our office manager quietly slipped me a note. "Your mother is in reception, very upset. Security is standing by. How would you like to handle this?" My hands trembled slightly as I wrote back, "Please tell her I'm unavailable and ask security to escort her out if necessary. I'll call building security to ensure she leaves the premises." The commotion was audible even from our conference room, my mother's voice rising as she insisted she had every right to see her son, the security guard's professional but firm responses, and finally the threat to call police if she didn't leave voluntarily. I sat frozen in my chair, colleagues pointedly avoiding eye contact as the drama unfolded just beyond our door. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Human Resources requesting a meeting. My professional reputation, carefully built over years, was now collateral damage in this family conflict. The HR director was understanding but concerned. "We need to ensure there won't be further disruptions, Joseph. Your personal situation is your business, but when it affects the workplace, we need assurances." I assured her the situation was being handled and that I was taking steps to prevent any recurrence, including considering a temporary restraining order if necessary. The words felt surreal coming from my mouth, discussing legal protection from my own mother, but they were necessary. That evening, Nathan called. For the first time in weeks, I answered, curiosity overcoming caution. "They're losing the house," he said without preamble. "The bank isn't accepting partial payments, and they don't have the full amount. Dad's talking about bankruptcy." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded, "but their financial decisions aren't my responsibility anymore." "How can you be so cold?" Nathan demanded. "They're your parents." "The same parents who told me paying their bills doesn't make me family," I reminded him. "The same parents who tried to have me arrested rather than accept my decision." The conversation devolved quickly after that, cycling through Nathan's familiar tactics: guilt, anger, manipulation, and finally a desperate plea: just $10,000 to get them current on the mortgage. "That's all they need. You wouldn't even miss it." "And what about next month's payment? And the one after that?" I asked. "This isn't about one payment, Nathan. This is about years of financial exploitation that I'm no longer willing to accept." His final words before hanging up were telling. "You'll regret this when you need family and nobody's there for you." I pondered that threat as I sat alone in my apartment that night. What exactly had my family been there for in recent years? What support had they provided that wasn't ultimately self-serving? The answer was painfully clear. 2 days later, I received a text from my father suggesting we meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes, to discuss the situation like adults. After consulting with Travis and my therapist, whom I had started seeing weekly, I agreed, with strict parameters. Public location, time limit of 30 minutes, no Nathan. The meeting was as tense as expected. My father looked older than he had at Thanksgiving, the strain of financial reality etched in new lines around his eyes. My mother alternated between tearful appeals and subtle accusations. "We've always been there for you," she insisted, rewriting history in real time. "We sacrificed everything for you and your brother. We're not asking for handouts," my father added, despite that being exactly what they were doing. Just help during a difficult time, like any family would provide. I maintained calm, repeating my boundary. "I've supported this family financially for years without recognition or gratitude. That arrangement is over. I'm willing to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect, but not one based on financial obligation." They left unsatisfied, my mother's parting words revealing their true expectations. "When you come to your senses and remember what family means, we'll be waiting. Until then, I don't know who you are anymore." What neither of them seemed to grasp was that I was finally discovering who I was. Separate from the role of family provider, free from the guilt and manipulation that had defined our relationship for too long. That discovery was painful but necessary, the foundation for whatever came next in my life. 6 months have passed since that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, and the transformation in my life has been profound. The initial weeks were the hardest, weathering the storm of family accusations, managing the anxiety of setting boundaries, and confronting the deeper psychological patterns that had allowed the exploitation to continue for so long. I've learned that freedom often comes with loneliness attached. The first major holiday after the break, Christmas, I spent alone in my apartment, ordering Chinese food and watching classic movies. I'd declined invitations from colleagues, not yet ready to explain my situation to casual acquaintances or risk pity. That night, I allowed myself to fully feel the loss, not just of the family I had, but of the family I had always hoped we could become. The tears that came weren't just from sadness but from mourning a fantasy. I had spent years believing that if I just gave enough money, enough patience, enough understanding, my parents would eventually see me as equal to Nathan in their eyes. That night, I finally accepted that some voids cannot be filled, some recognition will never come, and that's not a reflection of my worth, but of others' limitations. News about my family reaches me occasionally through my cousin Michael, who has become an unexpected ally. My parents were indeed forced to sell their home, moving to a two-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. The foreclosure on their credit record made renting difficult, and Michael admitted they had needed his co-signature on the lease. Nathan's restaurant venture with Marcus predictably collapsed before it began. According to Michael, Marcus disappeared again after a planning meeting at an expensive restaurant charged to Nathan's new credit card. The fallout forced Nathan to take a full-time position as an assistant manager at a local grocery store, his first stable employment in years. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had worked at that same chain during high school to buy my own school supplies while Nathan received allowance money. Financially, the difference in my own life has been substantial. Without the drain of supporting 3 additional adults, I've increased my retirement contributions, built a proper emergency fund, and even begun researching investment properties. The resources that once disappeared into the black hole of family emergencies now strengthen my own foundation. More significant than the financial changes, however, has been the emotional liberation. I no longer flinch when my phone rings, no longer feel the weight of impending demands with every family interaction. My therapist, Dr. Catherine Wilson, helped me recognize the patterns of emotional manipulation that I had normalized and developed strategies to maintain healthy boundaries. What your family did, she explained, during one particularly insightful session, was create a dynamic where your value was measured by what you could provide, not who you are. Rejecting that dynamic isn't selfish. It's self-preservation. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I had an unexpected encounter that tested my resolve. While shopping at a specialty grocery store 30 miles from my apartment, far from where I expected to see anyone from my former life, I literally bumped shopping carts with my mother in the produce section. The shock on her face mirrored my own. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, the ambient noises of the store fading away. She looked smaller somehow, the designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a dated sweater. I noticed her roots showing gray. The salon visits clearly less frequent without my financial support. "Joseph," she finally said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied, searching for the right words. "How are you and Dad adjusting to the apartment?" A flash of something, embarrassment perhaps, or resignation, crossed her face. "It's been an adjustment. Your father's had to take on some extra work to make ends meet." The old guilt began to rise, that familiar pressure to rescue, to fix, to provide. I acknowledged the feeling but didn't let it control my response. "I'm sorry things have been difficult," she nodded, then gestured vaguely at my cart. "Still cooking those healthy meals? You always were so disciplined about that." The conversation continued for perhaps 5 minutes, a strange dance of superficial observations and careful avoidance of the elephant between us. As we prepared to part ways, she hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to get coffee sometime? Just to talk?" I considered the request carefully. I'd be open to that, but with clear boundaries. No discussions about money, no guilt trips, no Nathan drama. She flinched slightly at the directness, but nodded. "I can try that." We exchanged contact information. I had changed my number after the workplace incident and parted ways. 2 weeks later, we met at a coffee shop. The conversation was stilted at first, decades of dysfunctional communication patterns difficult to overcome, but it was a start. We've had 3 such meetings since, each slightly less awkward than the last. My father has been more resistant to the new reality. He declined to join these coffee meetings, sending instead a brief email that managed to be both an olive branch and a justification. "When you're a parent someday, you'll understand the sacrifices we made." But I shouldn't have said what I did at Thanksgiving. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. I responded with equal brevity. "I hope we can find a way forward based on mutual respect rather than obligation." Nathan and I have had no contact since a final text message he sent 3 months ago. "Hope your money keeps you warm at night." I didn't respond, recognizing it as a last attempt to provoke guilt that no longer held power over me. The most unexpected development in my post-Thanksgiving life has been meeting Stephanie, a graphic designer who joined a volunteer project I coordinate. She noticed my reluctance to discuss family during team social events and shared that she had similar boundaries with her own parents. "Family is complicated," she observed during our 3rd date. "Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is create distance." With Stephanie, I've experienced for the first time what a balanced relationship feels like, one where give and take flows naturally. where support is offered freely rather than extracted through manipulation, where no is respected as a complete sentence. We're taking things slowly, both carrying baggage from past relationship dynamics, but the potential feels genuinely promising. The most profound lesson I've learned through this painful journey is that true family, whether blood-related or chosen, never makes their love conditional on your utility to them. Real love doesn't keep a balance sheet. Real love doesn't try to have you arrested when you establish boundaries. Real love doesn't consistently sacrifice one person's well-being for another's comfort. I've also learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Years of conditioning had convinced me that my needs were secondary, that self-sacrifice was the highest virtue. Now I understand that healthy relationships require mutual respect and reciprocity. Without those elements, you don't have family, you have dependence. The road forward remains uncertain. Perhaps my mother's tentative steps toward a new type of relationship will continue to progress. Perhaps my father will eventually join that journey. Perhaps Nathan will someday recognize his own patterns and seek change. I remain open to these possibilities while no longer predicating my happiness upon them. What I know with certainty is that I will never again allow financial exploitation to be the price of admission to any relationship. My worth is not measured in dollars contributed, emergencies resolved, or sacrifices made. That understanding has been worth every difficult moment of this journey. Sometimes, to rebuild your life, you must be willing to let certain parts of your past collapse completely. The foundation I'm building now is stronger, healthier, and truly mine. Whatever relationships stand upon it in the future, whether reconciled family or chosen connections, will be built on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. If you've ever found yourself in a one-sided relationship where you're constantly giving while receiving little in return, I hope my story encourages you to examine those dynamics honestly. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for your well-being, and ultimately healthier for everyone involved. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from toxic family dynamics? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult life lessons. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to stop enabling destructive patterns and stand firm in your worth. Thank you for listening to my journey.